Hey folks, I'm hungry. My name is Francis Goliato. I'm your Executive Director of Visual Communications. Welcome to today's panel conversation, just thinking about food right now. You guys ever seen that commercial? It's about something, they just keep saying pad thai, pad thai, pad thai. Anyway, I want some food now. I'm coming from Long Beach, and we acknowledge the Tonga people, the stewards of this land before we came to live here. I just want to thank you all, especially the artists, for creating community with us here at the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. And thank you to our supporters, especially our partners, for your valuable work. Folks, I'd like to welcome Kevin J. Wing, our festival programmer, and also one of our shorts filmmakers this year. Please check out their film Blue Suit, currently playing right now on our virtual theater as well. So folks, please welcome and say hello to Kevin.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm so excited to be the moderator for today. Welcome to the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, produced by Visual Communications. My name is Kevin J. Wang, and I'm a shorts programmer for this festival. I'm zooming in from Tongva Land in Los Angeles, California. And if you would like to read the closed captions, we're dropping a link in the chat now. Click on that and it will bring you to a new window that will open with the audio transcript. So we'd like to also thank everyone for making this film festival even possible, especially the folks at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal, California Arts Council, SAG-AFTRA Producers, Industry Advancement and Cooperative Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and HBO and Warner Media. And special thanks to all of our community partner organizations for their valuable work for continuing to support visual communications. Special shout out to our friends at VALA, Vietnamese Arts and Letters Association, and additional shout out to our friends at AMWA. Be sure to check out the AMWA Cookbook 1, Potluck. It features 12 recipes with interwoven narratives from contributors who remind us that shared food is environmental, a contribution, a means of celebration, and necessity. Now, let's start our artist conversation. I'm so excited to have some of our filmmakers from the Across the Dinner Table program here with us today. I'm going to invite them to please turn on their video. I'll go ahead and pass the mic and invite you to please introduce yourselves by sharing your name, where you're video conferencing from, and the name of your film. So why don't we go ahead and start with Ashley.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Samyima, but you can call me Ashley. I'm calling in from LA, and my film was Front of the House.
Hi everybody, I'm Champ Ensminger. I directed Yai Nin, and I am dialing in from Seattle, Washington.
Hey everyone, my name is Hugh Gray, and I am the director of the short documentary Quan 13, and coming from downtown LA.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Yadao. I'm calling from San Francisco, and I'm the producer, director, or co-director of the short doc Roots and Wings, Yana Gilbuena.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to each and every one of you for joining us today. And I have so many questions for you all. I loved being able to program your films, and I'm not going to lie, after watching your films, I was so ridiculously hungry. It's not even funny. So I would love to start with a question for Ashley. Your film just told such a relatable story in such an incredibly heartfelt manner. It's really about just this granddaughter trying to pursue her dreams and, you know, her grandmother not coming eye to eye with her. And I would love for you to share with us, where did that inspiration lie for you to make this film?
I think first and foremost, just homesickness, because I'm not from LA, and being away from home, so Hong Kong, was really hard for me, like in college. So as my student thesis film, I really wanted to just like selfishly connect with home again through my own project. But also, I also really wanted to see more representation of not so perfect, like grandparent and grandchild relationships, because especially in animation, I grew up watching a lot of, you know, maybe more Western style of animation, and it always portrays this grandparent relationship as very tender and always very upfront and heartwarming, but I didn't have that, you know. And it's not because my grandparents didn't love me. It's just they have a different way of expressing their love. And like thematically with our whole film program, it's about food. A lot of it is expressed through food. And so that was the inspiration to my grandmother. Yeah.
That's awesome. I just love that story, and I loved how you were able to kind of tie it in and just to build that relationship between the grandmother and the granddaughter throughout your film. And I think this is a really good segue, speaking of grandmothers, for Champ, your film, Yainin. I just feel like Yainin is just such a badass woman running a business of over 50 years. And from my understanding, Yainin is your own grandmother. So I would love for you to share with us what that experience was like making a film centered around someone who was obviously so influential to your life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Ashley also like touching on very kind of like unique relationships with grandparents. She, you know, I identified with her as very much of a grandmother growing up. She would come and visit the States. A lot of our family is up here in Washington State. And then when I lived in New York for a chunk of time, I decided to move back to Thailand, to Chiang Mai in 2014. And that just really recontextualized my relationship with her and seeing her as more of like a business owner, and but also how she interacts with the people that have been around her much longer than a lot of her, you know, her children have at this point. Yeah, it was a lot of just catching up with what that relationship with her is, and but also it's kind of, you know, spending a lot of time with her during that year and a half or so living in Thailand. You realize that her house, and I think a lot of like grandparents, you visit them, it's like a time capsule. They're surrounded by pictures of what the family has been like over decades, and their life has been very consistent, you know. And I wanted to portray the film as just kind of a day in the life. It's not intended to be like a sweeping biography about this woman. It's more like what it feels like to visit a grandparent, especially one who you've had a long distance relationship for, you know, for a long time. Yeah, and so it was very profound. It was also very helpful that, you know, it was a very much a family production. My mother was the one that conducted the interviews with my grandmother, and I thought it was very important to have that dialogue between mother and daughter. I just kind of wanted to be, you know, typical guy behind the camera and just see what happens, you know, and how these interactions unfold. So.
Yeah, I love that. I also just want to particularly note that I loved every single time Yanin would just show her phone and just show us like the cute dog pictures. I felt like that was so like grandmotherly, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so adorable. And not only is she this badass woman, but she's also adorable, and she has a soft spot for these like really cute dogs.
Yeah, a lot of the shoot was very much kind of scripted, but that was very spontaneous. She was getting a text from my cousin Nick, who's down in Austin, and he's a goofball, so he would send her just these silly dog memes, and I thought that was really fun to catch like in the moment. So
yeah, it certainly revealed like a fuller character in your grandmother, and it was just so sweet to see. Awesome. Well, I think too, like something between Champ, your film, and Ashley, your film, is just this idea of like family and also broader just like cultural communities and whatnot. And for Hugh, your film, Hoang Mi Ba, I just loved how this film really touches upon Vietnamese diaspora, specifically in Paris within the context of film. I'm wondering what led you to make that decision to focus specifically in Paris as opposed to other parts of the world?
So for me, I didn't start traveling around the world until I was in my 30s. And what brought me the first time to Paris was for my MFA through NYU for poetry. And during the summer and the winter, we would have residencies in Paris. And so that was the first time that I went to Paris and discovered that there's actually this like vibrant community of Vietnamese Americans there, you know, because travelogues and travel shows, they don't really focus on that. They focus more on like the traditional like view of what Paris is. And so I knew that if someone like me who is Vietnamese didn't capture this story, especially of, the first generation, then no one would really do it. And so I really made it my mission to capture their stories, because these are very like hardworking people. And in my documentary, I said how, they're hidden but in plain sight, and that's how it was. So hardworking that when I asked for, some of the subjects that I could interview them, they were so surprised, like, why would you want to interview me? So.
Yeah, that's so special. And I especially loved how you said that, like, you normally see a specific type of way of like Paris is being shown, but you rarely get to see this specific area of Wang Ba. And so like to explore that and offering like a spotlight on that was like so special. And to kind of switch gears, Lisa, with your film, something I really appreciated was just the intentionality of it. And I feel like your specific intention to highlight not only just a chef, but to highlight specifically a Filipino-American chef. Can you expand on what led you to that decision?
Yeah, I think, so if I'm speaking on behalf of the rest of my team, we're all big foodies, and we love shows like Chef's Table, and big fans of Anthony Bourdain. And so we love the lens on food through culture, but we felt like we weren't seeing enough women, for one thing, and then we weren't seeing our stories. So that to us was the point of that episode, specifically because the three of us are part Filipino, but we also are working on a whole series so we could focus on other cultures, other female chefs with different cultures.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just love like everything about that, and just like the amount of shots of just both getting, the chef's like personality and story, but then also all the shots of the food that she was cooking for us. It was just such a wonderful experience to view.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because the other chefs that we're speaking with, they're all very, it's very community based. They're pop-up dinners. They've all created pop-up dinners out of necessity to tell their stories and to bridge cultural gaps. But during this pandemic, it feels kind of like an uphill battle being able to get back into that mode of for the chefs to bring people together at a table, and for us to be able to film that. But I feel like now more than ever, it just felt special to capture that. But yeah, eating with your hands is a very Filipino, traditional Filipino. It's a Filipino tradition, and to be able to capture that and to see people who aren't Filipino do that was important for us to show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned really captured kind of this overarching theme with this program, in that I think there's something special about each and every one of your films being about food and focusing on food in some way, shape, or form, because food is such an integral part of our culture. And it's also a big part of community. And in a pandemic, it's a little bit harder to find community in person, but there's almost this nostalgia that now, watching through the lens of 2020, watching each of your films was especially really very heartfelt and nostalgic. I would love to, I have a question for you, Ashley. You specifically chose to set your film at a fishball noodle stall in Hong Kong. I'm a huge fan of street food. I love street food so much, and I'm sure everybody who's tuning in is also a fan of street food. Can you share with us why it was important to highlight that specifically in your film?
Yeah, so again, like going back to the whole homesickness thing, because I grew up in Hong Kong and I wanted to just, reconnect with that place. But why specifically fishball noodles? At first it was going to be beef brisket noodles, and it was going to be at a cart, because you also see a lot of makeshift like shack kind of street food stalls. I think those are also really charming. But then I don't remember why I chose to go to fishball noodles, but I can say that I don't know how you say this, but there is a specific dialect and group of people, even within like Han Chinese. There is like Hokkien people, and then my family is Teochew people. I think in English it's Teochew, but anyone can correct me if I'm wrong in pronouncing that. But it's Teochew people, and when I went home last time I was home, I had fishball noodles with my aunt, who also like raised me alongside with my mom. So that was a very poignant memory for me, and one that still like I keep in my heart like to this day. And when I think of home, like, oh, I really miss having fishball noodles with my aunt. And so I remember choosing fishball noodles then. Another reason was I don't get to go home often, but when I do, I almost experience home like a tourist again. Like I would walk around the streets and notice things that I didn't appreciate when I was growing up because I didn't have to leave. But then once I left, I was like, oh my God, all those small things, like the amount of exhaust fans that just line the street, and then you walk down the street and it's just like oil, like the smell of oil and different foods blending together, and people just sitting out in the street on those folded out tables. Like those things I started to miss because I can't see that here in LA. And so when I wanted to do this film, I wanted to really like portray that kind of beautiful messiness in a way. It's not messy. It's like, there's a lot going on in one frame. I really wanted to capture that, even though, you know, like we had a small team. Yeah, and so during that process too, I wanted to make sure I was going out into the street, taking pictures, asking my mom, does this look right? And things like that. So I think a huge part of why I chose a fishball noodle shop is because one, connection to my own family, and second, the whole process allowed me to reconnect with things that I missed when I was younger.
That's lovely. I also just really love that, like, one, we rarely really see like fishball noodle stalls in any form of like arts, entertainment, like all of that. So it was especially like cool to see that it's being highlighted within your film. And I almost felt like you transported us to Hong Kong itself, especially with like the sound design. It felt like we were there with you.
Thank you. Yeah, can I speak about the sound design? Because I love what my sound designer did with the film, because he went to Hong Kong when I was in Hong Kong, and he like stood in the street and just recorded the sounds. So you hear the traffic light and the people talking. That's all from, I think, from Tsim Sha Tsui and also from Central District. He went to all those like most, there's a lot of people there like bustling around. And he just like stood there and recorded it. So to be able to share those sounds too, like I'm really grateful for sound designer for even doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is incredible. I love that so much. It really is like a moment in time that you captured, and now you're allowing us all the privilege to be able to transport ourselves to Hong Kong right now, especially during time that we're all in quarantine and we can't go there now. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Champ, my question for you is, I know earlier you mentioned almost like a time capsule, being able to film Yainin and just seeing the things around the house and whatnot. I feel like whenever you make a film about family, you come to learn like a lot of things, or you shine like new light on something, or there's a new perspective that you've stumbled upon. Did you kind of have a moment like that for yourself as you were making your film?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of other fellow documentary filmmakers for digging into your subjects is interviews, and to get as much conversation with your subjects as you can. Because you can just get more depth of story, and but also that you want to make sure that you're using your time economically on the shoot. Like we shot for 3 days, and we just wanted to get, you know, the right amount of material and her to cover like these certain stories that we kind of got from her, like the scooter story, which is great. And like shout out to the animators. I work at a post-production house up here in Seattle, and I work around a bunch of great animators, and that was an editorial solution for us to get that fun story in without spending too much time on it, was to animate it, basically to get her, you know, in this really cute animation with my mom and her siblings on the scooter. And I would think that we left no stone unturned when we did all the pre-interviews for the shoot. And then I learned on the set that my grandmother was a voice actress in an audio drama back in the 50s, that she would play these different characters during, for this like frequent audio drama, kind of like a podcast, but on the radio, right? And it made sense for me that she could really kind of like rally when she's on camera, because she used to be sort of a performer. But that was a whole dimension that I was like, why didn't we get any of that? Is there any like documentation of that? That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, especially our elders, you don't realize how much of legends they are, and especially what they've lived through in the certain times and in the certain maybe geopolitical contexts that they're coming from, that they've seen some amazing things, and you have to remember to ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just have to ask, has Yainin seen the film?
Yeah, I was in Thailand last December for a cousin's wedding, and I had no idea what to expect for Thai weddings. They're about as lavish as like an Indian wedding in very different ways, but it was, and my grandmother was kind of like, she's the family matriarch, so she had the mic for a lot of it, and it was a thing. And we had a rough cut at that point, and I shared it with her on her iPad on the way to the airport or something. And she watched it just kind of like in the front seat. And then we were getting the bags out, and she said, "It's pretty good." Yeah.
That's amazing. Hey, I mean, a pretty good from a grandparent is like A+ for us. That's awesome. I love that. Hugh, similarly with all of these stories so far, your film was just so deeply personal, and specifically within just cultural identity and exploring Vietnamese diaspora. I know for myself as a Vietnamese American, I watched it and I was deeply resonating with it throughout. And I was curious for you as the filmmaker and also being the host of this film as well, what was kind of your biggest takeaway after wrapping this production?
Yeah, so it was definitely this Herculean type of effort, not only being the producer and scheduling and making sure that, everything was on time, but also being in front of the camera as well. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway was, I shot a lot of different subjects from different generations. And so it was just interesting to see how generationally people view identity, especially with the younger generation. They view it as something that's very fluid. Like one minute they can be more French and another minute more Vietnamese. Whereas with the older generation, they, view their identity as I'm, Vietnamese 100% wherever I am. And so I think just being able to show that range of what identity means and how it can be so different even generationally is something that I think hasn't really been shown on in media either. So that was like the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, I love that kind of juxtaposition between when you were interviewing those folks who were like millennials, younger, and just talking about the fluidity of their identity, but then you would jump to an older gentleman who was still like feeling so nostalgic to the point of tears of his time while being in Vietnam. I felt like that was so beautiful just to see how generationally we've been impacted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lisa, I had mentioned this, but I just loved the energy that Yana had and just introducing Kamayan-style Filipino food to folks of different backgrounds. I feel like in a lot of ways, all of your films are presenting a culture perspective through food to our wide audience. And specifically in your film, Yana is just introducing not only like Filipino food, but a specific way to consume this type of food. And I'm sure there was a lot of memorable moments on set. So I'm curious, what was your most memorable moment?
I think, if I'm being honest, because I do love food, it was at the end when she fed us. you know, we had gathered some friends to be on set to eat at the dining table, but we were all, come on, we were all salivating, and I just couldn't wait to cut and wrap and just eat. And she's so generous with her food. I've been to, I don't know, a handful of her dinners in San Francisco, and she's so generous with her food. And I know that for her 50 States tour, it's the same that I've heard from people who've been to her dinners in different cities, is that she's so generous and warm and giving with her food that it's she's cooking with love, and you sense that, and it's delicious, and you eat it. So that was, I hate to say it, that was the most memorable part, was getting to eat at the end.
Honestly,
And
I
also,
think,
like, it was also getting to eat with the crew. Some of the crew had never had Filipino food, so it was just like being able to see their faces, you know, and like lighting up. So yeah.
yeah. Honestly, I don't blame you at all. I think that would be my personal favorite as well, being fed at the end of a production. So that is so awesome. And also everything that you shot looks so beautiful and so delicious that to be able to wrap a film production and just eat and relax must have been truly a treat.
It was.
Awesome. I would love to pose a question for each of you. And Ashley, maybe you can start us off, but what do you hope is the biggest takeaway for our viewers after watching your film?
I think there's probably two main dimensions to the film's takeaway, in like for my wishes anyways. The first one is the whole street food culture. I'm sure like there's so many documentaries and films celebrating that, but like with art, there also should be action in, you know, supporting these businesses and making sure that they're not evicted, and that the shop, you know, the shop prices aren't going up, that the tenants can't even afford them anymore. So I think there needs to be a lot of action in that part, and hoping to just be like shining a light on how valuable these places are. It's not just a shop, it's livelihood. It's, you know, a symbol of family and culture. But the other part is communication, because I think that's something I've learned a lot over the past few years, is learning to communicate with my family, and how we might not see eye to eye, but at the base of it all, you know, they love us a lot. And it's learning to like all different kinds of ways of communicating with them and how they're showing our love, because eventually, or at the bottom line, the granddaughter and the grandmother, they both just want to help each other, but because they're both not showing it in the way that the other person understands, then there is that clash and there's that misunderstanding. So I hope it can cause some kind of reflecting on the ways that we interact with our family. Yeah, so I think that's the other takeaway.
I love that. Champ, can you share with us your takeaway?
Sure. I was hoping to definitely help project a very universal experience of visiting a grandmother, or, you know, your elders, especially from the Asian American context of having Native family still in the country, and just what that feeling is. And I hope from so far the people that we've shared it with has predominantly been American communities, and that has been really just satisfying and really kind of like uplifting for me. This is my first festival run, and the festivals that have had us, there's just been a really warm reception, and people sharing each other's stories about their own grandparents and that sort of thing, like this panel as well. What I feel like might be more of a subtle takeaway, I guess, is just there are dimensions of Thai culture that I was hoping to highlight in this that you don't see as prevalent in like tourism and things like that, as far as like the perception of what Thai culture is like from like a mainly Bangkok based context, like in Chiang Mai. And you know, Chiang Mai is where my mother and I are from, where my grandmother is, and that's how I very much identify. And that facet of being Thai is just so unique to me as an adult, just kind of seeing what other versions of Thainess there are. And she speaks a dialect of Thai that is kind of a receding dialect that I feel like she is the last person in our family to speak that way. My mother still does, but it's not being retained. Like, I'm still trying to hold on to my conversational skills as best I can from like a Central Thai Bangkok kind of like official dialect, versus her dialect is very, kind of throwback. And the film is a lot of kind of cultural preservation, is an attempt to capture her generation's experience of being Thai and what that was like when it's sort of kind of homogenizing now. So the film is just as much about her as it is about, it's sort of a love letter to the city of Chiang Mai for me, and how uniquely Thai in a very certain context it is.
Yeah. I love that. And I feel like a word that has been really resonating with me as you were speaking was really what you said earlier in this Q&A of like your film being almost like a time capsule, just like capturing all of these memories and the specific dialect from Yainin and all of that. And it's so beautiful that, and I'm so grateful that your film is being shown at this festival so that we can share this time capsule with all of our viewers. Hugh, I would love to switch over to you. What's your biggest takeaway?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Visual Communications as well as you, Kevin, for selecting the short documentary. I feel like because this was the first food documentary I made, like so validated. So, but another one big takeaway I want for everyone to have is to really get off the beaten path when they're traveling or even in their city, and go out there and really discover the rich immigrant communities and enclaves that are out there, and not be a tourist. And it may make you a little uncomfortable because of language barriers, but again, food is a universal language, and sharing a meal will open doors and open hearts, and that's the main takeaway. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yes, I love that so much. And just to be able to encourage that message out there is definitely needed. And I feel like that will resonate so much with those who watch your doc. And Lisa, how about for you? Biggest takeaway for our viewers?
I think for us, there is, if I could say two takeaways, one would be if there's a little girl out there who feels like she doesn't see herself, who is wanting to get into food, cooking, or even storytelling, because I consider chefs storytellers, to be able to see themselves and say, oh, someone's telling my story and I can be just like her, to be able to see that is one takeaway for young people, but also for just everybody, especially in these crazy times right now. That food is essential. We all need food, but food is what feeds our souls and connects us, and it is the common denominator. We all can sit and eat together and learn about our differences and our what we have in common. So it's the bridge, and I hope that people take away from that.
Absolutely. I love that message too, and that like food really is a place for us to gather around, as the title of this program is called Across the Dinner Table, for us all to sit around a dinner table and share food and conversation, build community that way. And I feel like your films are able to really connect us in so many different ways. I have a question from the audience, and this question is for all the filmmakers. What is your one comfort food that reminds you of family/home?
Oh, I have one.
Okay, awesome.
It's tomato fried egg. It's so good. And I made it the other day, but it's really not the same. It's interesting how every household could have their own version of tomato fried egg. Like if I went to my friend's home and ate it, it would taste different because their mom made it differently, or their dad. Or if I went to a restaurant, it tastes different too. So I think it's really hard to nail that specific, my aunt made tomato fried egg, but it's definitely tomato fried egg.
I love that. And that's so true. Every household will have a different spin on it. You'll never, and then they'll all argue that theirs is the best. That's the thing. I love that. Champ, how about for you?
Yeah, so unfortunately, as a kid, I was pretty scared of a lot of the spicy food that my family would, and like northern style Thai food has a long, deep history and reputation of being very good but very spicy. And I grew up on chicken nuggets, but I will say, as far as like a little bit of a taste of home that mom was generous enough to make all the time and too much at some points was sticky rice and omelet, and basically like a Thai style omelet called kai jiao, which if you ask an American chef to make a Thai omelet, you'll be like sorely disappointed there's not enough soy sauce or enough sugar, or it's not deep fried enough. But I have a lot of fond memories of my grandmother or my mother, if she wasn't around, making like a sushi ball sort of sticky rice and then putting some omelet on top, and then me and my cousins, just a bunch of little toddlers, just running around grabbing a handful and then like going off and doing something. But it's very mild, obviously, so it's pretty easy for kids to eat. But I often ask for that with family dinners, or even when I'm visiting my grandmother in Thailand, like, and everyone's like, you know how to eat now, right? Like, I got reacquainted with Thai food because I worked for a few years at Pak Pak Thai restaurant that's based in Portland, and then they have a couple locations in New York and one in LA. But and that it took me a long time to get accustomed to food from that region, but I always go back to that because it's just so easy. And sticky rice is like very defining aspect of Northern Thai culture for sure.
Yeah. Wow, I am getting hungry again, and I already had lunch right before this. And I'm starting to see a theme. Both your answers had eggs involved, so there's definitely a theme going on here. Hugh, how about for yourself? Comfort food?
So my comfort food is called soup nui, which is like the Vietnamese chicken noodle soup. And I think every Vietnamese mother has a recipe for it. Like, it's essentially just, it has to be macaroni noodles, absolutely macaroni noodles, with flavored in like a pork broth, whether it's ground pork or pork ribs. So whenever my mother makes me soup nui, like, is when I'm sick or when I'm feeling a little sad, and it just makes me, it just makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. And yeah, it's kind of my like go-to for whenever I feel down. And yeah, chicken soup for the Vietnamese soul.
That's awesome. You know, Hugh, as you were describing it, when you said macaroni, I was just taken back. I was just like, oh my gosh, throwback Thursday. Tell me about it. It's so comforting. It's so good. And Lisa, how about for you, comfort food?
Speaking of eggs, I could say on my dad's side, he's Hawaiian. I have to say a loco moco, but so that has egg. But on my mom's side, I want to say this dish called arroz caldo, which is like a rice porridge, and you could add chicken to it, and you could probably put eggs in it too if you want. But it's kind of like juk, and that to me is like the perfect comfort food in the wintertime, or yeah, whenever you're missing home.
For sure. All this food talk. I'll share that, like, for me, my comfort food is Vietnamese. It's a Vietnamese dish called thịt bò lốp lắc, and it's loosely translated to shaking beef, and it's just like cubed steak beef, and it's got just like such a rich sauce, and you pour it over white rice, and it's just incredible. It can be garlicky too, and that always takes me back. So now I feel like I need to go to like the grocery stores just to make me some comfort food. Amazing. Well, I want to squeeze in one final question for everybody. What are you working on next? Ashley, let's start with you.
I think, to be honest, this whole pandemic has made me like kind of prompted a lot of reprioritization and just rethinking like what it means to be an artist, especially when the world is crumbling and there's so many things that need hands-on instead of like yeah, it's just like seeing how can I help, and maybe sometimes that isn't art, and that's okay. So expanding my definition of what it means to be an artist, so it doesn't always have to be making or grinding on the next piece, but also just being curious and learning more. So there's definitely so many things that I still need to learn about the world and the different issues that come up that needs to be addressed. And so I think my next thing in terms of like a project scope is just learning more about things that I need to learn about. And then hopefully through then I will learn about things that I can potentially make a story out of, or maybe not, because some things aren't meant to be told by me. So yeah, it's just like reprioritizing and thinking about what it means to be an artist. But eventually I would love to make a webtoon because my love is drawing. I'm actually not an animator. I do animation, but I love drawing first and foremost, and I love comics. So I would love to make a story in the medium of a webtoon or a graphic novel. Yeah, but the story, whatever it comes up, I think has to revolve around what's happening in the world. So I will make sure to look deeper into things. Yeah.
I love that. That's so inspiring. To redefine what artistry even looks like is a question that I feel like we should always be challenging ourselves to stay continuously curious about the world and how we play a part into it. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Champ, how about you? What's next? Champ, I think you're on mute.
Kind of to piggyback off of what Ashley was saying about reevaluating what your medium and what your subject matters are. I kind of, yeah, like during this pandemic, luckily I'm a full-time editor at a post-production house. So it's been a lot of like just working on things that have already been produced, or, you know, that I haven't had to touch like that. But I think as far as personal work, thinking about what the limitations are of productions right now, it's just like, what do you do, and or do you have to be confined in your medium of producing live, you know, things with a lot of actors and that sort of thing, with production crews all in the same place? And ever since learning about my grandmother being in an audio play or a radio play, I've been kind of curious about audio drama as a medium, and how that you're not limited by physical location to hire actors of any background, because you don't need the optics of someone looking a certain way. You can cast them because they fit that role. But I don't know if anyone's familiar with any audio dramas, like Homecoming was one that came out a couple years ago, really gripping, like suspenseful, dramatic, and like a very stacked cast of big actors. And I was just really impressed by that experience. I think a lot of us are listening to podcasts right now, or audiobooks and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not actively working on a project like that per se, but I feel like if I express it to a group like this, then it'll manifest. As far as a future production, like a short film, I thought it would be interesting if I were to do something family oriented. I grew up as a restaurant kid. As my family moved to the States, a lot of them, their hustle was like a lot of Thai American families and Pan Asian families, that they ran a restaurant and they would live above the restaurant, and the kids would be babysat, you know, in the kitchen and that sort of thing. And having remembering a lot of that experience while doing this documentary has been really poignant, because I've got a lot of there's a lot of cousins that can commiserate around that experience of being restaurant kids and what that feeling was like. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of see it from the perspective of the kids growing up in that, what it was like to be in a family that, you know, hustled that way. And so yeah, that's something I'm kind of bouncing around right now.
That's awesome. Well, whatever your next project is, we can't wait to watch it or hear it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And Hugh, how about for you? What's next?
Well, first, I want to give a special shout out to my composer on the documentary. Like, he made all the original music and scores for it to make it really come alive. So that's Bao, and he also has like an LP coming out as well.
We have a show together on Monday.
Oh, he also does a podcast called Coffee with Bao, and I can share that in the link. I'm his first interview subject, but Oh, my next project, sorry. So Quant 13 would, for me, has always served as being like a pilot for something bigger. And so I'm working on turning that into a limited series of either like 10 episodes or 13 episodes where I travel around the world looking and discovering other diasporas through the lens of food. But because of COVID, I've kind of had to kind of pivot from, traveling all over the world because of the restrictions right now to really focusing more on the local immigrant communities here. And so I think a lot of travel content is now about discovering your backyard and rediscovering your city. And so I think it really falls in line with what everyone is consuming now, so.
I love that. That's so exciting. And I think it's so true that sometimes we forget to look in our backyards because there's always something to see there. And we're excited to see what you bring up next in all of that and all the amazing food that you'll highlight from there. All right, and last but not least, Lisa, how about for you? What's next?
Yeah, so for us, same. This episode was a pilot to see like, okay, can it have some legs? And so now we have been developing the rest of the series with some other chefs, and we're going to look into crowdfunding. We're going to look into potential investors who want to help us bring the rest of the series to life. And then separately, yeah, this pandemic has gotten us to really stretch ourselves as storytellers. So we've reached out to some friends and acquaintances, and we've put together some pandemic shorts. And we're relying on other people to be their own cinematographers, and then we're just putting stories together. And it's a way for us to show, what people have been up to and how they've been coping during the pandemic and how they've been thriving and how they've been struggling, that way we all feel like we're not isolated and confined to our own spaces. We see that everyone's going through the same thing. So that's something that we've already put out 2 episodes. They're on our Vimeo site, and then we have 2 more that we're editing, and then we have a bunch more stories to put together. But yeah, those are things that are in the works right now.
Wow, that's so beautiful, and I love that you're highlighting specifically within this time, because I feel like because we're so confined to our own houses or living spaces that we don't get a chance often to see what's happening outside of these 4 walls that we live in. And to be able to showcase that is really amazing and creating another sense of community. So definitely let us know how we can follow that project just to see.
Sure, thank you. I will say too, I noticed the people that have sent us their videos, everyone is trying to cook more at home. It's something that they're finding therapeutic and that they're enjoying, that they wouldn't have otherwise done, because we all like to go out and we love, going out is great and socializing, but it is nice to just kind of have that time at home to reflect and cook and meditate and all that stuff. That's something that we're seeing a lot of.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. This year has been the most I've ever cooked in my entire life. And I think I've become a pro chef at this point. And especially after watching each and every one of your films, I was just so inspired. I was like, I need to make that. Well, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I wish I could talk to you all forever, but I just want to thank you all again for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you all and having your films be a part of our festival this year. To our viewers, don't forget these films are still viewable now in the Across the Dinner Table Shorts program. If you haven't watched it yet, well, what are you waiting for? The viewing window closes at the end of this month, so definitely go check it out. If you enjoyed this conversation and the festival lineup, please consider donating to Visual Communications. Your support will help sustain our year-round operations and programming. So go to vcmedia.org for more info. Also, for the most recent updates on the festival, please visit festival.vcmedia.org or follow us on social media accounts at VC Film Festival. And also, if you're going to post about the festival, don't forget to tag us on hashtag LAAPFF 2020. It has truly been such a delight, and I hope to see you at another conversation. Thank you so much.